Aloha. Welcome to Americans Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and today's title is Trump Denied Ties to Project 2025, Wants His Authors Back on Staff. In a 922-page document report known as Project 2025, it ranges of everything from deportation to the unraveling of federal agencies to enhancement of power for the executive office. Donald Trump said he didn't know anything about it. But let's go back to April 2022 in a keynote address that was sponsored by the Heritage Foundation, which is the force behind Project 2025. Donald Trump said the following: "This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do. When the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America." Okay, so that's April 2022. Let's fast forward to July 11th, 2024, Truth Social. Donald Trump said the following: "I know nothing about Project 2025. I have not seen it. I have no idea who's in charge of it. And unlike our very well-received Republican platform, had nothing to do with it." Now, we'll discount the fact that over 140 people that have worked for Donald Trump were involved with the project. Many of them were authors, and particularly Stephen Miller, who's been nominated as Deputy Chief of Staff and Homeland Security Advisor, and Russ Vought, who's going to be again as nominated for the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB. So we'll start there. Our guests, my esteemed guests, Chuck Crumpton, Ben Davis, and my co-host, Jay Fidell, will explore what Donald Trump did or didn't know, and more importantly, what's 2025 all about? What is the project all about? Good morning, gentlemen, and Jay, to you first. Do you believe Donald Trump had any knowledge of the 922-page report that he said in July? Certainly did not. What's your take on that?
Oh, well, if he didn't have knowledge, it would be the first time he ever moved his lips without lying. Now, wouldn't that be something? Of course he lied. I mean, in fact, it's one of those lies that, you can see right away, real-time lie. He lied about it because he thought it would be, bad for his campaign. And his lie was one of those lies that people relied on to vote for him. Many lies. So I guess he changed his mind. Must be he changed his mind. But the fact is that it was one gaslight after another, and it's a gaslight now. And if you look at the description, if you look at the description of Project 25 and some of these conservative write-ups of it, it sounds so innocuous. And the description, the characterization of the various points in Project 2025 is another gaslight, because it ain't true what they say about it. It's pretty gross. Anyway, we're finding out now that, Trump was unserious in this statement he made in his campaign. And we're finding out he's unserious in his appointments. We should talk about that. We're finding out this is all kind of a joke. It's not serious. It's provocative. And the bottom line is that all of these things are a way in which he can create conduits to take all the power in government. And that's what Project 2025 is about. But what troubles me is that this is a big lie. And now it's coming through, and people have amnesia about what he said before, although I'm sure there are people who voted for him that are wondering what happened here. But it opens the question of what else did he lie about? Was his whole campaign a tissue of lies? What is he lying about now? Did he all of a sudden stop lying from the 30,000 lies? No, he's gaslighting us again. He doesn't want us to know what he will do or what he is doing. And I think that is going to be, the basic principle of his administration. The other thing is, is he losing it? It's possible that he's losing it, that he doesn't remember, like some of the people who voted for him don't remember. And he's letting Miller and Vought, and maybe some of the others, maybe Vance, maybe Jared, maybe Elon Musk, actually run things. And that worries me more, because what it sounds like is that he's taking advice from people without knowing what it is. that he's actually declining mentally. And the question raised is who will be making the decisions through his administration? Will it be Vance? Will it be Kushner? Will it be Miller, Vought, or Elon? It sounds like Woodrow Wilson in the last year of his term, where he had a stroke and his wife ran the government. So if Trump is in fact, declining, seriously declining, and he's having amnesia like a lot of people are in this country, then maybe other people will be running it from behind. So we really do 2025, or will he change his mind about those things? Or will the people behind him change their minds about these things? The whole thing is unpredictable and fickle. Deportation is unlikely. So is dismantling the government. It's just a huge logistical problem, and it stands in the way of his performing. Will he stick with these appointments? And up till now, he's not. And he's likely to fire some of these people too, even if they are confirmed, just like in The Apprentice. He gets off on firing people. What I'm saying is this reveals much more than just his view and his lies about 225. It's anybody's guess what the guy is really saying, what he will really do, what will really happen is in his administration. So I am very concerned about that as a side effect of the 2025 lie.
Not to relitigate the election, but you mentioned 30,000, and for those that don't remember, 30,000 plus documented lies in his 4-year term as presidency was noted. And so, did the media just give him a pass during this election, not to tie him closer to the fact that he was lying about his lack of knowledge about Project 2025 and his involvement and knowledge of it? I know it's after the fact, but Americans have to realize that Donald Trump lies. Even his supporters know that he lies. But worse yet, do they just not care about the content of 2025 project, or they just never bothered to look at the details of it?
That is the question, perhaps the question of the century. We know they voted for it. That's pretty clear. And we know that they were only looking at the conservative or ultra-conservative media. So maybe they didn't know. Maybe they didn't look at the Times or watch MSNBC. And they found ways to avoid knowing. They found ways to avoid recognition. They found justification in some way. And that's power. Power is to make white into black and black into white and green into red. And that's what Trump did. And the media was complicit in that because they really didn't hold the line on the fact that he was lying. I mean, if there's one thing that's troubling about what the media did or didn't do in the run-up during the 4 years of his administration and during the 4 years of Biden's administration, is they didn't catch him on the lies. They may have said, he falsely stated. That's not good enough. It's an outrage that a candidate for public office, that a president should be lying to the people. That's completely unacceptable. And yet, they didn't really hold him to it.
Yeah, good point. Ben, a key component of Project 2025 is the dismantling of federal agencies. DOJ, the Department of Education, Department of Energy, potentially the FBI. Does that speak to why we're getting the kind of odd qualifications of nominees in his government, such as Matt Gaetz, Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, and Pete Hegseth? Is that all hand in hand ties into Project 2025, that these would be the perfect candidates to dismantle federal agencies and because of their blind loyalty to Trump and or kind of their wackadoodle kind of personalities? Did I say wackadoodle? Yes, I said wackadoodle.
Wackadoodle. Yeah. I've tried to think about it. There's a part of me saying, well, why are these kind of fifth-rate persons being nominated? I mean, in terms of the quality of what we would look for if we compare with people in those positions in prior administrations. And one part of it may be that anybody above a fifth quality person has passed on being in this administration. I mean, they just don't want to have to deal with Trump. Trump is a pain to deal with, right? With the way he is. And the other part of it is, and I go with Jay with this, is that to an extent there are people behind Trump, all of these people that are being nominated are completely malleable and completely dependent or at least loyal to Trump. And so therefore they will do everything that is asked of them, independent of any rule of law. I really do believe that. Just to give an example, we all went through this moment the last day or so with South Korea, right? Where we're looking at the president at 11 o'clock at night declares martial law, right? All these members of parliament go running to the parliament, right? And they make a vote overturning what he did 6 hours. And then he sits there for a while, kind of, and finally he acquiesces to what the parliament has done, right? And so I was thinking this morning, I said, well, what if Trump did that on day one? What would happen in his administration? What would happen? And would the members of Congress come together and actually vote out his declaration of martial law? If people got in the streets like those people did in South Korea, would the police, militias, military, National Guard, would they start shooting at him in loyalty to Trump, or would they be loyal to the Constitution? And the fact that I'm asking that question to myself is like making me think most likely people would just go along to get along. All these loyalists would do exactly what Trump said, and we haven't seen any people who really are willing to take on Trump. They're all fearful that if they take him on as a politician, that they'll be primaried with the money for the other person coming from Musk, right, or something like that. So they would just bend the knee. And then you say, well, maybe the media could save us. But I don't know if you've been looking at it the way at least I'm perceiving it, is that the media is in the process of bending the knee to whatever Trump wants. I've even been surprised on my Facebook feed. I'm starting to get a lot more misogynistic kinds of little vignettes than I think I got before the election. I said, what is my thinking even being shaped here, So, I do wonder whether there's, in contrast to South Korea, where people have a memory of military rule, here we don't have a memory of it. And so maybe we won't fight back. We'll just go along and to get along as they classically do here in America.
All righty. Well, that's grim, but thank you. Appreciate it. Chuck, to you, of Project 2025, what parts of that 922-page document, and I apologize in advance for having you have to opine on something that's 922 pages, but what's the most troublesome aspect, in your opinion, on Project 2025?
The main problem I have is not so much the project. I mean, yeah, it does lay out stuff that would be an absolute aberration to the Constitution, to democracy, to the will of the people, to the voice of the people, any of those things, to their rights to housing, education, healthcare, voting, essential, basic human rights and civil rights. But for me, it's the people. Project 2025 has gathered a collection of people that I think Jay and Ben are exactly right. I think you have to go to a certain level of the barrel to find those people, because any intelligent, sentient, rational being with any awareness of Trump's first 4 years and the 4 years in between can look at the people who tried to serve Trump's interests Trump's way for that period of time. Look at what's happened to them. Giuliani, Sidney Powell, former attorneys general, former FBI directors, former heads of departments, former cabinet heads. They came out and they spoke up, some of them, before the election. The second factor that Jay and Ben have identified is You've got a genuflecting media. But look at who the media is. Again, who are the people making the decisions, directing the actions and the choices in the media? And I think if you look at the Project 2025 people and you look at the media people with the monetary control, the Rupert Murdochs and the rest of them, you're going to see an overlap there. So if there's anything that somebody connected to Trump may have learned, is that he can't depend on his individual relationships and power and control and awarenesses. He doesn't have that. And in fact, Jay is exactly right. He's mentally deteriorating so visibly that that's not going to be there. But if that group of people, his political leaders, his cabinet, his other rest of his leadership team, and the media decision makers and power guys, and the people who are willing to contribute $1 million to go to his inauguration, it's a very simple equation. If you give me enough money, or you bring in people who will give me enough money, then I will give you a position of power and authority, subject to my ultimate veto power and my power to turn your life into ashes, as I did for Rudy and Sydney, and so many of the rest of them.
Well, I'm reminded of two things in your words, and that is you had mentioned the nominees as far as the bottom of the barrel. I'm reminded of what Hillary Clinton did in her campaign back in 2015 by referring to him as a basket of deplorables. And I kind of wish she had never backtracked on that. I think she accurately described, some of the supporters close to Donald Trump, and she did back down. She reversed course on that. And then, of course, when you talk about people who have been associated with Trump, the Rudy Giuliani's, the Sidney Powell's, I'm reminded of Rick Scott's, I think it was the title of his book, Everything That Trump Touches Dies. So not that it pertains to our conversation here today on Project 2025, but in a way it does. So thank you very much, Chuck. Jay, back to you. A big part of 2025 is to enhance the executive powers of the president. And I'm wondering if you think part of that process is taking place right now, where these nominees have to go through the Senate through advise and consent, and whether or not Donald Trump attempts to inflect his enhanced or perceived enhanced powers as president, and particularly if he tries to implement or go around advise and consent with the recess appointments of his nominees. Your thoughts?
He lost that, but he may try it again to change the rules to allow him to make recess appointments without consent and all that. That was an extraordinary move, but even the Senate, for all that it, all the trouble it has, it didn't go along with it. But I want to add a thought that I've had just listening to you guys. First of all, Ben, your point about South Korea is so profound. I envision Trump sitting there at a television set, watching the martial law thing, watching the people, who struggled to get in to the South Korean legislature. I mean, they had to fight their way in, and the South Korean army was trying to keep them out. That was violent. It reminded me of January 6th, except, I guess the result was that the people had their way in South Korea. But I can envision Trump, seeing that and saying, if I try that, I can make it work. I'm going to watch what happens in television in South Korea, and I'm going to perfect what the president there did. And I'm going to have my martial law. It would not surprise me at all. It would not surprise any of us. So anyway, I want to move on to another point that has come to my mind in the discussion here. Okay, so he wants loyalists And his whole bag here is not only to disturb and disrupt and provoke in these appointments, he wants to make very sure that he has loyalists. Okay, so the sheriff in Florida, who he appointed as DEA, that's very interesting because the guy gave a phony baloney reason for pulling his name. Was something like, I want to spend more time with my family. It was an obvious, non-reason. And you think, maybe Trump made a call to him and said, look, you're going to be DEA. I want to do the worst possible things to anybody involved in the drug trade. And here's my requirements for you. Are we on the same page? And the guy says, no, I do believe in the rule of law. However, the rule of law is in the state of Florida, which is questionable. But I am not going to go along with that. But it suggests to me that there was a midnight telephone call. It suggests to me that Trump is recruiting all the people involved to be totally loyal, so they get out of his way. And when he does what he does in all of these agencies, in all of these Project 2025, initiatives. The other point that comes up is you look at DeSantis and now Peter Navarro. Okay, Peter Navarro went to jail, man, and he's been appointed to something or other today, as reported in the newspapers. And DeSantis, really? DeSantis and Trump hated each other. They called each other names. So I think it's more than just saying to somebody, I want you to be loyal. It's putting them through fire and brimstone to make them prove that they're loyal, even after he fires them and insults them. If they're still loyal, then he knows he's got a die-hard loyalist. I think it's one of the tests that is now being revealed with these appointments, because some of them he's criticized and hammered on, and yet they're still around. And if they're still around, he says, oh, they're really loyal. Mm-hmm. So I think that comes to my mind. We are going to have a cabinet that is completely loyal, and this cabinet is going to be devoted to do what is in 2025 as it may change, because, he is declining and he changes his mind and he's fickle, and he may enforce some of that. He may not enforce other things. And if he tries but fails, then he will blame Biden. He blames Biden for everyone, for everything. And so I suggest to you that this is really in aid of his own dementia. And he'll do what he bloody wants to do, whether it bears a rational relationship to 2025 or not.
You nailed it last week, Tim, when you pointed out that Trump's a one-trick pony. His self-image is The Apprentice. His favorite two words are "you're fired." Hey, he's not even sworn in yet, and he's already fired 3 of his top people. HCAG, right?
It's true.
Hegseth, Department of Defense, and the Florida DEA sheriff. And that's only for starters. We're only at the beginning of December. He's got 6.5 more weeks to hire and fire people. He's getting into his rhythm, his mode.
I think it was just, cannon fodder to bring these people on board, knowing that they, the backgrounds alone would disqualify them. And, you bring them up at the front lines, and they, you wear the Senate down basically before the Senate even does their job. You just wear them down, and so that any questionable nominee will be nominated. Whereas if they were fresh off the line, there's no way they would make it. So I think it's a planned strategy on purpose, not doing background checks, or knowing their background and bring them forward anyway. So it's an interesting strategy, one I don't think we've ever seen before, not in my lifetime.
He's still in his transition here. He's not the president, and yet he's on the headlines. In fact, the first 5 levels of news stories in the national press every single day. He is sucking all the oxygen out. Biden is trying to get some attention, but going to Africa was really not worth the trip, I think. Sorry. But Trump has got to fulfill his narcissistic needs.
Yes.
And so he gets on there every day. I mean, my favorite one yet is hell will visit you. I forget the term he used. If you don't release the hostages by the time of my inauguration. Really? Do you think that Hamas is all perturbed by that? You think they're shaking in their boots? You think Hezbollah or Iran is shaking in their boots over that? And what's going to be interesting is when his inauguration day comes and they don't release the hostages, which is, I think, at least a fair chance. What's he going to do? He's going to try to forget it. He's going to try to blame Biden. He's going to try to excuse himself from the threat that he made. But we will see more of that because as a narcissist, he wants to be in the headlines every day.
You know, Jay, I have to admit, when I first heard that quotation from him, I was thinking he was referring to the incarcerated hostages of January 6th. Because he claims they're patriots and hostages. I mean, that's what he calls them. But, okay, so thank you, Jay. Ben, of the many ideas...
It's out of Animal Farm.
Yeah.
Some hostages are more hostages than other hostages.
Yeah.
Right. Ben, of the many ideas of Project 2025, you're a law professor. How many of those ideas that Trump tries to get away with, slap it down, that may be in complete violation to the rule of law, how many do you think are legally challenged? And of those challenges, do you think some of those rise to the Supreme Court?
The only twist I can see is with regards to the quote unquote independent agencies of the executive branch. I was listening to an analysis of the new Federal Communications Commission guy who's coming in, and somebody deconstructed the bland language, as you say, Jay, and was basically saying that what he's calling for is more speech of the kind he likes. That's not like free speech equal and all that. And so one of the comments that I think was pertinent was that what would the Supreme Court do with the reining in process that it's doing with these independent agencies if those independent agencies basically follow an extreme right agenda? Are they going to rein in those power plays by those institutions because of the vision of it's supposed to be sort of a narrow authority, a narrow amount of discretion that judges will decide really these issues as opposed to expertise in those entities? Or will they say that's fine because it's precisely the kind of oppression that they think is perfectly good, going back to some kind of 19th century vision of sort of the role of government? And I don't know. Like, for example, let's take in the Federal Communications Commission area. We want lots of free dialogue, online. But say if there's somebody wants to say something about LGBT stuff, okay? Sorry, we can't have that because that harms children, okay? You see? Or that harms this thing, or that harms that. So the end result is what? You only have a certain line that is allowed to be said because anything else is looked at as sort of harming some terribly fragile group, right? That they actually don't care about, but they're just instrumentalized. That will the Supreme Court say, no, you got to be even-handed in not doing anything? Or will they say, yeah, that's okay. That's okay. That's a reasonable.
Let me jump in on that point because I understand that in Project 2025, they want to redefine porn. And part of that redefinition or the new definition includes transgender ideology. Now, right. I hearken back to the 1980s where I think it was Larry Flynn in Hustler magazine, a porn magazine, went before the Supreme Court. And I don't remember the name of the justice, but the famous quote was, "I don't know what porn is, but I know it when I see it."
Thank you. Yep.
And it just seems to me that these justices won't know what porn is, but if it involves transgender ideology, then by God, that should be incorporated in the new definition of porn.
Oh yeah, and one thing that seems to be a common theme, I think, particularly on the right, is that people don't understand something until they have a member of their family who is actually that way. I can remember there's a senator from Ohio who was kind of anti-gay stuff until he finally had one of his kids turned out to be gay. And then he kind of opened up and said, really, does it have to go that far for you to have empathy? Does it have to be really that close before you can kind of conjure up that there might be something? I mean, even today.
Was it Dick Cheney?
No, I've forgotten his name. But even today, there's this thing about the transgender case at the Supreme Court today. They had the oral arguments, and from what I hear, the questioning about it was, basically sort of like, we don't know what this stuff is, and we don't like it. We never know anybody like that. I mean, it feels like, as opposed to maybe having sort of, well, are there people like this, and do they need this kind of health care? Is that important and all that, Mm-hmm. So it's unfortunate, but that's where we seem to be.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ben. Chuck, I saved all the hard questions for you today. It's your turn. Despite the legal challenges that we may or may not see go before the courts, what do you think Americans can do on their own, particularly regarding some of these horrific, draconian ideas that are coming from Project 2025? And I'm thinking maybe in the lines of some, horrendous deportation acts that we may see, may not see, I don't know. What do you think the average American can do about it, other than contact their representative?
Who knows? I mean, maybe it's time for another Harriet Tubman and another Underground Railroad. But the concept being, say, hey, look, Ben is exactly right. If you've got people that have actually lived with people of Trump's target categories and have had good understandings, respect, affection, alliances, maybe people will step up to protect their neighbors. I like Ben's phrase, pray for foreigners. Mm-hmm. But I would expand it beyond foreigners. Pray for all those that Trump and his minions, that group of people, classify as the other, as the enemy. Because they are going to be targets. And the question's going to come down to us, whether somebody opens up their TikTok or Instagram or whatever and sees a gesture of human kindness and encounters an opportunity to do a kindness for somebody who is one of those targets or one of those groups. So I think that's going to be the question for us ordinary Americans.
If I can jump in on that,
please.
I'm absolutely certain that anybody who is a foreigner in this country right now is watching what we as Americans are doing in the face of this. They may not say anything, but having been an immigrant for 17 years in France and seeing French people on the streets defending immigrants, I didn't say anything, but it made me feel good that these French people were going out of their way to stand with me. And I bet you, and in fact, I've seen it already here in the United States. Just think of that. Those 11 million or 20 million people are watching all of us to see what kind of people we're going to be, with all the churches, with all the other stuff that we have, with all the, religious stuff that people say, what kind of person are you going to be? Because there were people, for example, back in the Japanese internment camps, and all that stuff. I mean, World War II, the middle of all that, right? And they went down to see their mayor, ordinary Americans, and said, this isn't right. Mayor, this isn't right what you're doing to Joe and Mary over here. And maybe they said to Joe and Mary, Joe, don't worry, we're going to take care of your house, not going to allow anybody to take it away, or we're going to take care of your business and keep it there. And when this stupid thing ends, I'm going to, it'll be here for you. That's what I can do, mm-hmm. As opposed to sort of like, hiding out, or better yet, even saying, look, I can get an advantage here. I could buy their business at a cheap rate or something. It's just money. It's just business. Or, I can buy their house at a cheap rate, because they're caught in a box, right? So we're all you have to understand, not only inside the United States, but around the world. Around the world is looking at how we're going to act. Those folks in South Korea are looking at how we're going to act. And quite honestly, each of us is looking at how we're each acting together inside the United States as Americans. I don't know what Thanksgiving was like for you, but I imagine there was a lot of looking around the Thanksgiving table between people.
I like this, that Americans can set an example for not only Americans, but for the outside world as well. And I think your answers, Chuck and Ben, are spot on. And those are the things that gives me hope as we move forward in the next 4 years, is not so much what Trump attempts to do, but how Americans can best respond to it. And with that, Chuck, thank you. And let's go around the table for our final thoughts. Jay, I'll start with you.
Ben, do you still speak French?
Yes.
Just checking. Just checking, in terms of options. No, it's more than what Trump does or doesn't do. It's more than his unpredictability. It's more than his, fickleness. It's more than that, because on the one hand, there's various factors. On the one hand, it's those guys in Congress. I'm not sure that they feel the way we would like them to feel. I doubt they do, and they control both houses. That's not a good thing. And they're the ones, in charge of that branch of government, for sure, under the leadership, for example, in the House of Mike Johnson, who does not work for the people at all. He works for Trump and many of the others. So that's one thing. The other thing is the media, which, we should and need to discuss in greater detail. I mean, they are kind of fading, and they will fade more. And the question I have in my mind is, how will social media deal with that? The First Amendment can live through social media. And in the past year, there's been at least half a dozen new entries into social media that most of them are, constitutional. Most of them are liberal. And so that's very important to know. And the question is whether they can turn public opinion in the face of Trump's state media, which he is trying to design right now. It's a virus. This kind of lying and prevarication, this kind of violence, it's a virus. And we talked about it many times, Tim. We talked about stoicism. Mm-hmm. We talked about people catching the virus and acting not on instructions from Trump, but by being stoked by Trump. Mm-hmm. Doing things that they think he would like to see them do. And it really creates chaos. The one thing we can be sure of under his administration, and even now before, is chaos and confusion, and change for the worse. I think we can see that happening. But what really bothers me is a lot of people in this country are moving right, and they're moving right to take advantage of these conservative views and conservative stoicisms, things they think that Trump would like to see them do. And that includes violence. When we talk about the guy who shot the CEO of United Healthcare, okay, you can say that is other than a Trump stoked violence. But at the same time, remember that Trump is a big Second Amendment guy. And this was a shooting. And we have shootings at random. It's the norm. It has become the norm. And it will be, my suggestion to you, gentlemen, is it'll be more the norm going forward. Violence and insults and, outrageous, destructive things will happen in this country, because all that is a virus under Trump.
Appreciate your words. I always worry now in this climate we have, violence against our politicians and their families. This is the stuff of, banana republics in South America, that kind of behavior. And I don't want that to become commonplace, or we become desensitized to it. So thank you, Jay, for pointing that out. Much appreciated. Ben, your final thoughts.
I am going to second Jay. And, I guess one of the things that's happening to me is I'm really appreciating, maybe in a new way, decisions that people made in Germany when the Nazis came to power. I mean, people who were targets like Jews, what they did in trying to get out, what they did, even, families that committed suicide. I'm beginning to understand what that must have been like to look around you and say, where did the Germans go? That feeling of alienation to those around you and to the leadership and all that. I mean, I've read that stuff before, but I just am feeling it a little more viscerally than I used to. And really all kinds of other people that I've read about at the time who just were alienated to what they watched happening around them. I think that kind of feeling is a, believe it or not, healthy feeling, because you're feeling a contradiction. And maybe we're all at the point where we're trying to figure out, okay, we feel this contradiction. What can we do? What can we do to fight this inconsistency, incoherence? Recently I got an idea to write to my senators, and write to my congressman, write to my mayor. People told me, well, it's worth nothing, But it's like, maybe it is, but at least that's something I thought I could do, And it's like trying to think of what are the things I can do. And, there are many people who are vastly greater minds than I will come up with things. We understand that a lot of these states and the NGOs and all that are already sort of loaded for bear for what happens on December 20th, ready to jump in. We don't know exactly what they've got set up. They're not letting it, they're hiding the ball too. We'll just see what kinds of ideas that people come up with to try to stay consistent with human dignity. That's the thing that is going to be curious to watch, is how is the respect for human dignity going to be manifested in a time of cruelty.
I suspect your participation in this show is a protest about doing nothing in this new second administration. So doing nothing does leave you at a point of helplessness. And without hope, I think all Americans are going to be at a disadvantage. They'll lose sleep, if nothing else. Thank you very much, Ben.
Let me tack on to what Ben said. The price of liberty, said Thomas Jefferson, is eternal vigilance. Jefferson wasn't perfect, but that quote really lingers. And I think we have to be vigilant now if we're going to protect the democracy. We also have to speak out. And I, for one, for all of us, appreciate your participation in speaking out. But there's letters to the editor, there's op-ed pieces, there's letters to sitting legislators, and as never before. Look at South Korea. They reacted. They did something. They did something right now. They recognized the stakes were so high, and the stakes are just as high here. And we all have to do something. I'm not suggesting violence or anything, but I am suggesting an uproar of voices, and hopefully the First Amendment can carry those voices.
Well said. Thank you, Jay. Chuck, you get the final word here.
It comes back again to the people. You can talk about policies, you can talk about Project 2025, you can talk about all those things, and Trump's all over the place. But look at the people that he's trying to put in position to determine and dictate how people in this country are treated. Look at the target groups that he and that group of his people are targeting. Look at all of the good people within those target groups that contribute valuably to the units they're part of, to the communities they're part of, to the country as a whole. So the question is going to be for each and every one of us and all of us collectively. Are we going to stand up for the good people who are targeted because they are good people and because they deserve to have us stand up for them? It's going to be how we conduct ourselves as people, individually and collectively together, for the protection of the good people who are targeted.
Good point.
That is going to determine our course, I think.
I think you're right. I think, Ben, you said it pray for the foreigners. I'd like to amend to that a little bit, and that is, I ask all foreigners around the world to pray for Americans. God knows we'll need it. And with that, I'm Tim Apicella, your host for American Issues Take One. I'd like to thank my esteemed special guests, Chuck Crumpton, Ben Davis, and my co-host, Jay Fidell. Won't you join us next week? And until then, aloha.